John Harris had always been a man who believed in justice. As a police officer in a quiet town, his life seemed predictable. But nothing could have prepared him for what lay ahead. 20 years ago, on a crisp autumn day, John was dispatched to a crumbling house on the outskirts of town. The call had come in as an abandonment case, multiple children left to fend for themselves. John's heart raced as he approached the door, his instincts on high alert. His knuckles rapped against the wood, the sound echoing in the otherwise silent street. "Police, is anyone home?" No response. He felt a knot tighten in his stomach. A faint cry, barely audible, drifted through the cracks of the door. With a deep breath, John pushed it open. What he saw made his blood run cold. 6 young girls huddled together in the corner of the room, eyes wide with terror. The walls of the house were bare, the floors strewn with debris, the scent of abandonment heavy in the air. John approached cautiously, kneeling down to their level, trying to offer some sense of comfort amidst the fear. "It's okay. I'm here to help," he whispered. But the girls remained silent, their expressions frozen with a mixture of fear and distrust. The oldest, a girl with neatly braided hair, finally spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "Our parents, they didn't come back." John's heart broke. These children, frightened, alone, and so small, were left to face a world of uncertainty. He called for backup, his voice shaking as he relayed the situation. Child Protective Services were on their way, but even as he waited, John couldn't shake the feeling that this moment would change his life forever. As the social workers arrived and began taking the girls' statements, John overheard something that made his chest tighten. "We'll have to separate them," one of the workers said, their tone matter-of-fact. "Finding a home for all 6 together is unlikely." John's mind reeled. The thought of these girls, these sisters, being torn apart after losing their parents was unbearable. His own loss, the aching void left by his late wife Sarah, surged to the surface. Without thinking, he blurted out, "What if I took them?" The room fell silent. All eyes turned to John, stunned disbelief written across their faces. Even John himself couldn't quite believe what he had just said. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized how deeply he meant it. These girls needed a home, and maybe, just maybe, he needed them just as much. The social worker, Linda, approached John cautiously. "Officer Harris," she began, her voice gentle but firm, "this is a massive responsibility. You're talking about adopting 6 children. And not just any children. These girls will face challenges, and so will you. Are you sure you understand what you're getting into?" John nodded, though uncertainty gnawed at the edges of his resolve. He knew it wouldn't be easy. He knew there would be obstacles, but deep down, he also knew he couldn't turn his back on them. The paperwork, the questioning, the doubts, all of it washed over him like a tidal wave in the days that followed. Friends and colleagues questioned his sanity. "John, have you lost your mind?" his partner Mike exclaimed one evening at the station. "You can't just adopt 6 kids on a whim." John ran a hand through his hair, his voice low but determined. "It's not a whim, Mike. I can't explain it, but I feel like this is what I'm meant to do." Still, as determined as he was, the path ahead was fraught with difficulty. The girls, still reeling from the loss of their parents, were wary of John at first. The youngest, Jasmine, barely spoke for days. Amara, the eldest, seemed to bear the weight of the world on her young shoulders, trying to protect her sisters from the uncertainty of their new lives. The first night they spent in John's house was a quiet one. The girls, unused to their surroundings, clung to each other, their wide eyes darting around the unfamiliar space. John sat at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee, wondering if he had made the right choice. Doubts crept into his mind like shadows in the night. Would he be enough for them? Could he give them the love and stability they deserved? But then something happened that pushed those doubts aside, if only for a moment. Amara, her small frame trembling, approached him, her voice shaky but steady. "Sir," she said, "will you help me with my sisters?" John felt a lump form in his throat. He knelt down to her level, meeting her gaze with as much warmth as he could muster. "Of course, sweetheart," he said softly. "I'll help you with anything you need." From that moment on, something shifted. Slowly but surely, the walls that had once separated John from the girls began to crumble. He learned their likes and dislikes, their hopes and fears. He spent hours reading bedtime stories, attempting, and often failing, to braid hair, and navigating the delicate balance of being both a father figure and a protector. But not everyone in the town welcomed the new family with open arms. Mrs. Thompson, the town gossip, had always been friendly with John, until she saw him with the girls. One afternoon, as John walked the girls to school, Mrs. Thompson watched from her porch, her brow furrowed with disapproval. "John Harris," she called out, "what are you doing with those girls? People are talking, you know. They say it's unnatural." John felt a surge of anger but bit his tongue. He knew the stares, the whispers, the thinly veiled racism. He had expected it. But that didn't make it any easier to bear. "They're my daughters, Mrs. Thompson," he said, his voice steady but tight, "and that's all that matters." The days turned into weeks, and the challenges of raising 6 girls, especially girls of a different race, became more apparent. John often felt out of his depth, especially when it came to understanding the cultural differences that set him apart from his daughters. He tried to learn, to immerse himself in their world, but there were times when the gap felt too wide to bridge. One Sunday, the girls asked to attend the church their parents had once gone to, a predominantly black congregation that John had never stepped foot in. He felt a knot of anxiety tighten in his chest as they walked into the church, all eyes turning to them. The girls clung to him, sensing his discomfort. Amara, always the brave one, took his hand and squeezed it, offering him silent reassurance. The service was unlike anything John had experienced. The music was vibrant, the preaching passionate, and the sense of community palpable. But John couldn't shake the feeling that he didn't belong. After the service, an older woman approached him. "You must be the officer who took in these sweet girls," she said, her eyes kind but searching. "Yes, ma'am," John replied, extending his hand. "John Harris." She looked at him for a long moment before breaking into a smile. "You've taken on quite a challenge, Officer Harris, but I can see the love in your eyes. You come to me if you need any help with these little ones. You hear?" John nodded, grateful for the support. But even as he leaned on the church community, the challenges of being a white man raising black daughters in a predominantly white town weighed heavily on him. One evening, as he was tucking the younger girls into bed, he overheard a conversation between Amara and Simone that sent a chill down his spine. "Dad can't help us with this," Amara said, her voice tight with frustration. "He tries," Simone replied softly, "but he doesn't understand what it's like." John's heart sank. He had always known there would be things he couldn't fully grasp, but hearing it from his daughters made the reality hit home in a way he hadn't expected. He wanted to burst into the room, to reassure them that he would do whatever it took to understand, but something held him back. Instead, he stood outside the door, feeling the weight of his inadequacy settle over him like a dark cloud. The tension only grew as the girls got older. Tiana, the athlete of the family, began to distance herself from John. Her once vibrant personality dimmed as she struggled to navigate the complexities of being the only black girl on her basketball team. One evening, after a particularly rough practice, she stormed into the house, slamming her bag down in frustration. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" John asked, concern lacing his voice. Tiana glared at him, her eyes filled with anger and something else, something deeper. "You wouldn't understand," she snapped. "You never will." John recoiled as if he'd been slapped. He had tried so hard to be everything they needed, but in that moment, he realized that there were some battles he couldn't fight for them, no matter how much he wanted to. The arguments became more frequent, the tension thicker with each passing day. Tiana, once his vibrant, happy girl, had become a stranger. One night, after another argument, she ran out of the house, the sound of screeching tires echoing in the night as she sped away in her car. John's heart raced with panic. He called Mike, his old partner, who found Tiana at the bus station, trying to buy a ticket to anywhere but here. When John arrived at the station, Tiana was sitting on a bench, her eyes red and swollen from crying. "I'm sorry," she whispered when she saw him, her voice trembling. I don't know how to make this work anymore." John knelt down in front of her, his heart breaking. "I'm sorry too, sweetheart," he said softly. "I know I can't fix everything. I know I'll never fully understand what you're going through. But I love you, and I'll always be here for you. no matter what. The weeks that followed were tense, filled with long, difficult conversations and even longer silences. But slowly, Tiana began to open up. She started a blog about her experiences as a young black athlete in a predominantly white town, finding her voice and connecting with others who shared her struggles. As the girls grew older, John found himself facing new challenges. Simone, now in art school, flourished under the guidance of mentors who understood her unique perspective. Zoe, the bookworm, excelled in her studies while Layla threw herself into activism. Jasmine, the youngest, remained his constant companion, her sweet nature a balm to his weary soul. But amidst the triumphs, there were still battles to be fought. One afternoon, John received a call from Simone's school. She had been involved in a fight, something completely out of character for his usually even-tempered daughter. "She called me a name," Simone explained tearfully when John arrived at the school. "She said I wasn't wanted. That's why you took me in." John's blood boiled, but he kept his voice steady as he confronted the principal. "My daughter was defending herself against racist bullying," he said firmly. "She shouldn't be punished for that." The principal, uncomfortable under John's intense gaze, reluctantly reduced Simone's punishment to detention. As they drove home, John could see the defeat in Simone's slumped shoulders. He pulled over at a nearby park and sat down beside her on a bench, his heart heavy with sadness. "I'm so proud of you," he said gently, pulling her into a hug. "You stood up for yourself. That takes courage. I'm sorry you had to face that kind of hatred, and I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from it." Simone looked up at him, tears brimming in her eyes. "But why even try, Dad? Why try to be strong when people are always going to see me as different?" John took a deep breath, his voice fierce with emotion. "Because you are strong, Simone, and beautiful, and worthy, and you have the power to change minds and hearts. Don't ever let anyone make you feel small. You come from a long line of strong, resilient people, and that strength is in you too." Simone buried her face in his chest, her small body shaking with sobs. John held her close, realizing that his role as a father went far beyond providing and protecting. He needed to be a source of strength, a beacon of hope, and a fierce advocate for his daughters in a world that wouldn't always see their worth. As time passed, the girls continued to grow and pursue their dreams. Amara, now a social worker, dedicated herself to helping children in the foster care system. Simone's artistic talents blossomed, while Tiana became a professional basketball player. Zoe, ever the intellectual, continued to write, and Layla threw herself into her activism with a passion that sometimes left John in awe. But then, just when it seemed like they had found their footing, life threw another curveball. John's health began to deteriorate. What he had initially brushed off as fatigue from old age soon turned into something far more sinister. Shortness of breath, weight loss, and a persistent cough left him weakened and frail. He tried to hide it from the girls, not wanting to worry them, but they were too perceptive to be fooled for long. One afternoon, during a family barbecue, John collapsed, the world tilting and spinning around him as darkness took over. When he woke up in the hospital, his daughters were gathered around his bed, their faces etched with worry. Amara was the first to speak, her voice trembling with barely contained emotion. "Dad, why didn't you tell us?" John tried to smile, but it came out more like a grimace. "I didn't want to burden you girls," he whispered. "You all have your own lives, your own challenges. I didn't want to add to that." Simone stepped forward, taking his hand. "Dad, you've never been a burden. We're here for you, just like you've always been there for us." The doctor's diagnosis was grim. Stage 3 lung cancer. The road ahead would be long and difficult, filled with chemotherapy, radiation, and an uncertain future. But as John looked into the determined faces of his daughters, he knew he wasn't facing this battle alone. Each of the girls rallied around him in their own way. Amara, with her background in social work, took charge of coordinating his care. Simone brightened his hospital room with her vibrant paintings. Tiana became his personal trainer, helping him stay active. Zoe spent hours reading to him during chemo sessions, while Layla raised awareness about lung cancer through her activism. And Jasmine, ever the sweet one, became his constant companion, her laughter a light in the darkest of days. As the months wore on, John's strength began to return, But even as his body fought to heal, he knew the road ahead was uncertain. One evening, as he sat on the porch swing, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Tiana joined him, her voice quiet. "Dad, I've been thinking a lot about that night I ran away," she said, her words thick with emotion. "I was so angry, I thought you could never understand me. But watching you fight this cancer, seeing how you never give up, I get it now. That's where I get my strength. From you." John felt tears well up in his eyes as Tiana leaned her head on his shoulder. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered, "of all of you. You've become such strong, amazing women." The family continued to thrive, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. But John knew his time was running out. As he sat surrounded by his daughters, watching them flourish, he felt an overwhelming sense of pride. He had given them a home, a family, and in return, they had given him everything. Love, purpose, and a legacy that would live on long after he was gone. The Harris family would face many more challenges in the years to come. There would be moments of doubt, heartache, and loss. But through it all, they would remain united, their love for each other stronger than any obstacle life could throw their way. For John Harris, there was no greater reward than that. John Harris knew his body was weakening, but the joy of seeing his daughters grow into extraordinary women kept him pushing forward. He was constantly amazed by their strength and resilience, even as he quietly battled his illness. One crisp autumn morning, Amara gathered all her sisters for a meeting at the family home. John watched from the porch, his eyes tired but filled with curiosity as the girls huddled together, whispering and exchanging glances. "Do you think they're planning something for me?" he wondered with a small smile. His daughters were always up to something, whether it was organizing a fundraiser, planning an event for their community, or just surprising him with something heartwarming. Inside the house, the sisters were planning a celebration that none of them had ever imagined they'd be preparing for. John's 5-year cancer-free anniversary. He had beaten the odds, and now they wanted to honor him in a way that reflected everything he had done for them, and for the countless lives he had touched. "We'll make it a surprise," Amara said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "He deserves something that shows him just how much he means to all of us, and to the community." Simone nodded enthusiastically, already sketching out ideas for a video montage. "We'll include everyone, his old police buddies, the people from church, even the kids he's mentored over the years. This needs to be big." Layla, ever the activist, chimed in, "And we should use this opportunity to announce something even bigger. What if we created a foundation in his name, something that would help foster kids and adoptive families, just like us? We can keep his legacy going long after he's gone." The room fell silent for a moment as the weight of her words settled in. They all knew that their father wasn't invincible, and that time was slipping away, no matter how much they wished it weren't true. But Layla's idea ignited a fire in all of them. A way to make sure that John's love, sacrifice, and dedication to family would ripple out into the world for generations to come. "I love that," Jasmine said softly, her voice full of emotion. "Dad would be so proud." Over the next few weeks, the Harris sisters threw themselves into planning the event, keeping everything a secret from their father. They secured a venue at the local community center, contacted dozens of people whose lives John had touched, and even managed to raise funds for the new foundation. The day of the event arrived, and Amara volunteered to distract John while the others finalized the preparations. She took him out for a leisurely lunch, reminiscing about their years together. As they drove back toward the community center, John felt a sense of calm wash over him. Life had not been easy, but it had been full of love, laughter, challenges, and triumphs. As they pulled up to the community center, John noticed something strange. The parking lot was full, and there were people milling around outside, people he hadn't seen in years. "What's going on here?" John asked, glancing at Amara with suspicion. "You'll see," she replied with a mysterious smile. When they stepped inside, the room exploded with applause and cheers. John stood frozen in shock, his eyes wide as he took in the sight before him. Friends, colleagues, neighbors, and community members, people from every chapter of his life, were all gathered together in one place. Banners hung from the walls proclaiming, "Celebrating John Harris, a true hero," and thank you for your service and love." His daughters stood at the center of it all, beaming with pride and love. I don't know what to say," John stammered, overwhelmed by the outpouring of affection. Simone stepped forward, gently guiding him to a seat at the front of the room. "You don't have to say anything, Dad. Tonight is all about celebrating you." The evening unfolded like a beautiful, heartfelt tribute to John's life and legacy. A large screen lit up with the video montage that Simone had painstakingly put together. Clip after clip, people shared stories of how John had touched their lives through his work as a police officer, his dedication to the community, and most importantly, his role as a father to 6 remarkable daughters. One by one, the girls took turns speaking, each offering a personal tribute to their father. Amara spoke of John's unwavering support through her journey to become a social worker, while Simone thanked him for nurturing her artistic talents. Zoe credited John with instilling in her a love of learning and the courage to pursue her dreams of becoming a writer. And Layla recounted how John had always encouraged her activism. Finally, it was Tiana's turn. She approached the microphone, her hands trembling slightly as she locked eyes with her father. "Dad," she began, her voice strong despite the tears in her eyes, "I owe you an apology. For years, I struggled with my identity, with feeling like I didn't belong. I pushed you away, thinking you could never understand what it was like to be me." John felt his heart ache at the memory of those difficult years. He had always feared that he wasn't enough for his daughters, that he couldn't fully give them what they needed. But as Tiana continued, his fears began to melt away. "I was wrong," she said, her voice growing stronger. "You may not have understood everything, but you never stopped trying. You loved us unconditionally. You gave us a family, and because of you, I learned to embrace who I am. You didn't just change our lives, Dad. You saved them." By the time she finished speaking, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. John sat in stunned silence, his heart swelling with pride and love for the incredible women his daughters had become. He had always hoped he was doing right by them, but hearing their words, seeing how deeply he had impacted their lives, was more than he could have ever dreamed. When the applause finally died down, Amara stepped forward once more, a mischievous smile playing on her lips. "Dad, we have one more surprise for you." John raised an eyebrow, his curiosity piqued. "Girls, you've already done more than I could have ever imagined." Simone grinned. "Oh, we're just getting started." Tiana held out a large, beautifully wrapped box, her eyes shining with excitement. "This is for you, Dad." With trembling hands, John unwrapped the gift. Inside, he found a framed certificate and a thick folder. As he read the certificate, his eyes widened in disbelief. The John Harris Foundation for Foster Care and Adoption. John looked up, his voice barely a whisper. What is this?" Amara knelt beside him, her eyes filled with pride. "We started a foundation in your name, Dad. Its mission is to help foster children, particularly children of color, find loving homes. We want to give other kids the same chance you gave us." Zoe chimed in. "The foundation will provide support for adoptive families, offer cultural education programs, and work to break down barriers in the foster care system. We've already secured funding for the first year." Layla added excitedly, "Local businesses, community members, even some of your old colleagues from the force, they all wanted to contribute once they heard about it." John stared at the certificate in his hands, his vision blurring as tears welled up in his eyes. This was beyond anything he had ever imagined. His simple act of love, his decision to open his heart and his home to 6 little girls all those years ago, had rippled out to touch countless lives. Finally finding his voice, John looked up at his daughters, his heart so full it felt like it might burst. I don't know what to say. It's incredible. But girls, you don't owe me anything. Everything I did out of love." Tiana knelt beside him, taking his hand. "We know, Dad. That's why we did this. Not because we owe you, but because we want to share the love you gave us with others. We want your example to inspire more people to open their hearts and homes to children who need them." John pulled his daughters close, his shoulders shaking with quiet sobs as he held them. He marveled at the journey they had been on together, from those first uncertain days as a makeshift family to this moment of triumph and love. It had been a road filled with challenges, tears, laughter, and above all, unwavering love. As the night wore on, John found himself surrounded by well-wishers, each with a story to share about how he had touched their lives. The young man approached, his voice thick with emotion, as he introduced himself. "Mr. Harris, I just wanted you to know, seeing how you raised your daughters, how you embraced them and their culture, it gave me hope. It showed me that love really can transcend all boundaries." An older woman, her gray hair neatly styled, squeezed John's hand warmly. "I remember when you first brought those girls to church," she said, her eyes twinkling. "Some folks had their doubts, but not me. I saw the love in your eyes. You taught this whole town a lesson in what family really means." Later that evening, after the festivities had wound down and the guests had left, John sat on the porch swing with his daughters, the cool night air wrapping around them like a comforting embrace. The stars twinkled overhead, and for a moment, all was quiet. Amara broke the silence, her voice soft but filled with emotion. "Dad, when I was little, I used to dream about finding my real family. I thought that if I could just find people who looked like me, who shared my blood, then I'd finally feel like I belonged." The other sisters nodded in agreement, each of them having harbored similar thoughts at one point or another. "But now," Amara continued, "I realize we had our real family all along. You taught us that family isn't about matching skin or shared DNA. It's about love. About choosing each other every single day." Tiana, who had once been the most rebellious, now rested her head on John's shoulder, gently stroking her daughter's cheek. "And now we get to pass that lesson on to the next generation. Sarah will grow up knowing that love comes in all colors, that family is about so much more than what you see on the surface." John felt tears welling up again as he looked at his daughters. Strong, beautiful, compassionate women who had overcome so much and achieved more than he could have ever dreamed. "You girls," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you are the greatest gift I've ever received. You turned a lonely old cop into the richest man in the world. Rich in love, in family, in purpose. I may have given you a home, but you gave me a life worth living." The stars above them twinkled brighter, as if joining in their quiet moment of reflection. As the Harris family sat together, bound by a love that had overcome every challenge life had thrown their way, John Harris knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it together, stronger, wiser, and united by the unbreakable bonds of family. The night deepened, and the air grew cooler, but the warmth between John and his daughters never wavered. As they sat on the porch, the house that had once been quiet and filled with the haunting echoes of what could have been now buzzed with the energy of love and life. John leaned back in the creaking porch swing, his mind drifting back to the early days, when everything felt impossible, when he doubted whether he could be the father these girls deserved. Yet, as he glanced at each of them, he saw in their eyes a reflection of all they had become together. Zoe broke the silence this time, her voice soft but filled with the sharpness of memory. "Dad, do you remember the day you came to the school after I got in trouble for reading during class?" John chuckled. He had nearly forgotten that day, when he had rushed to the school expecting some disaster, only to find out that Zoe had been caught reading her latest novel under the desk. "How could I forget? I had to pretend to be upset while you were so proud of the book you were reading." Zoe laughed quietly, her shoulders shaking with the memory. "That's when I realized that not all parents would understand. But you did. You never made me feel like I was weird or wrong for wanting to escape into books. You even helped me find more." "You were never going to be one of those kids who colored inside the lines," John said, a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "And that's one of the things I love most about you. You showed me how to look at the world differently, through the lens of stories and possibilities." Zoe blushed slightly, her eyes shining. "It's because of you that I had the courage to keep writing. You made me believe I could be a writer." John shook his head, though his heart swelled with pride. "No, sweetheart, that was all you. I just cheered you on." Tiana shifted in her seat, her eyes locked on the horizon as the sky darkened further. "I think we all had moments where we doubted who we were, where we belonged," she said thoughtfully. "I pushed back the hardest, but I think it was because I was scared. Scared that you wouldn't understand, scared that I wouldn't fit into either world, yours or my own. John turned his gaze to her, his chest tightening at the memory of the fights they used to have, the hurt that had lingered between them for so long. I tried, but I know it wasn't easy for you. I wasn't always the father you needed. Tiana shook her head quickly. No, Dad, you were. Even when I was angry, even when I didn't know how to talk to you, you were always there. You never gave up on me. And that's why I didn't give up on myself. Her words hit John with the weight of years of silent understanding. Tiana had been the one who fought him the most, who tested the boundaries of love and belonging in ways that none of the others had. But now, sitting beside him as a mother herself, she was the embodiment of the strength and grace that he had hoped she would find. I don't think I ever told you how much you taught me, Tiana, John said, his voice hoarse. You taught me that love isn't just about protection. It's about letting go, trusting that you're strong enough to find your own way, even when I couldn't walk that path with you. Tiana smiled, her fingers brushing the small curls of her baby girl's hair. I got that strength from you, Dad. You didn't just protect us. You empowered us. The sound of crickets filled the air as the family fell into a comfortable silence, the weight of their shared memories wrapping around them like a soft blanket. It was Amara who finally spoke, her voice carrying the tone of someone who had always looked out for others. Dad, she said, hesitating slightly before continuing, there's something I've been meaning to ask you. John tilted his head toward her, his curiosity piqued. What's on your mind, sweetheart? Amara glanced at her sisters, her eyes flickering with the emotion she had always tried to keep in check. With everything that's happened, with all the lives you've touched, have you ever thought about writing it all down? Our story. Everything we've been through, the lessons we've learned. I think it could help a lot of people. The idea hit John like a lightning bolt. He had never considered putting their story on paper, but now that Amara mentioned it, it seemed so obvious. Their journey wasn't just about a family. It was about love, resilience, and the power to overcome seemingly insurmountable odds. It was about breaking through the boundaries of race, identity, and loss to find something much deeper. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully, already imagining the words filling the pages. I hadn't thought about it, he admitted, but maybe it's time. I think it could help other kids in the system, Amara said, her voice hopeful. There are so many who don't believe they can find a family that loves them like we did. And maybe, just maybe, we can inspire more people to open their hearts and homes. John nodded, a sense of purpose beginning to stir within him. He had lived a life full of meaning, but putting their story into words could be the final act of his legacy, a way to ensure that the love they had built would continue to ripple out into the world. I'll do it, John said firmly, meeting the gaze of each of his daughters. I'll write it all down. For you, for the families that come after us, for the ones who need to know that love, real love, can change everything. The next few months were a whirlwind of emotion and activity. John threw himself into writing, pouring every memory, every moment of triumph and heartache onto the pages. He relived the early days when he had doubted whether he could be enough, the struggles of navigating a world that didn't always accept his unconventional family, and the countless moments of joy that had made it all worthwhile. His daughters helped where they could, offering their own memories and perspectives, filling in the gaps of what he hadn't seen or understood at the time. Together, they crafted a narrative that was both deeply personal and universally powerful. The day came when John handed the manuscript to Amara, his hands shaking slightly as she took it from him. It's done, he said, his voice filled with quiet pride. Amara smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. It's perfect, Dad. The book, titled Love Beyond Color, The Story of an Unlikely Family, was published a few months later. It was an instant success, resonating with people from all walks of life. The story of John Harris and his 6 adopted daughters touched the hearts of thousands, inspiring countless families to open their homes to children in need. But for John, the real reward wasn't in the success of the book. It was in knowing that their story would live on, long after he was gone. It was in seeing the impact they had made, not just on each other, but on the world around them. The months passed, and Tiana's baby girl, Sarah, grew into a lively toddler. John's health remained stable, though the toll of his illness was evident in the lines etched deeper into his face and the way he moved just a little slower than before. But his spirit, his unbreakable love for his family, remained as strong as ever. One evening, as the family gathered once again for dinner, John looked around the table, his heart swelling with a mixture of pride and contentment. Amara, now a leader in child services, was helping a new generation of children find the same love and belonging that she had once needed so desperately. Simone's art had gained national recognition, her works gracing galleries across the country. Tiana, a former basketball star, now coached and mentored young athletes, passing on the lessons of resilience and determination that had shaped her own life. Zoe had published 2 more books, each more successful than the last, and Layla continued to fight for justice and equality in her role as a city council member. Jasmine, now a police officer, had followed in John's footsteps, dedicating her life to serving and protecting her community with the same compassion and strength he had always shown. As they joined hands to say grace, a tradition they had adopted from the girl's birth parents, John felt a deep sense of peace settle over him. They were more than just a family. They were a testament to the power of love, a living, breathing example of what could happen when you opened your heart and chose to love without limits. In that moment, as the laughter and warmth of his daughters surrounded him, John knew that his legacy would live on through them. Through every life they touched, every child they helped, every dream they made possible. And that, more than anything else, was the greatest reward he could have ever asked for. The Harris family was thriving, and John, though physically slowing down, felt stronger than ever in his heart. As the days stretched into months, his daughters became busier with their careers, yet they made a point to spend as much time together as possible. Family dinners were always a priority, and they filled the house with laughter, memories, and the love that had kept them bound through so many trials. One evening, after one of these joyful dinners, John sat with Amara on the porch. The air was cool, and the stars above twinkled brightly. Amara, ever the planner, had something weighing on her mind. She shifted in her seat, glancing at her father before finally speaking. "Dad," she started slowly, "I've been thinking about what's next for us. For the foundation." John looked at her, his curiosity piqued. "What's on your mind?" Amara's eyes gleamed with that fire she always had when she was passionate about something. "The foundation has been growing faster than we expected. People all over the country are reaching out, wanting to get involved, donate, volunteer. But there's a bigger need, Dad. And I've been thinking about how we could expand, maybe even offer scholarships for foster kids or create transitional housing for kids aging out of the system." John's heart swelled with pride. He had always known Amara would lead with a compassionate heart, but hearing her talk about expanding the foundation in such impactful ways brought a tear to his eye. "That's an incredible idea, sweetheart. You've already done so much for the foundation, and I can't think of a better way to keep it growing." Amara smiled, grateful for his support. "I've already started talking to a few people about partnerships. It's going to take a lot of work, but if anyone can do it, it's us. This family. We're proof of what love can build." John reached over and took her hand, squeezing it gently. "You have my full support. And more than that, you have the strength of this family behind you. Whatever you need, you just say the word." As the weeks passed, the Harris Foundation continued to grow. Amara threw herself into the work, rallying her sisters, building connections with community leaders, and even securing a few large corporate donations. The foundation was gaining traction, and with it, the legacy of John Harris continued to spread far and wide. But amidst all the excitement and growth, there was an underlying reality that none of them could ignore. John's health was deteriorating. The cancer, though fought valiantly for years, was slowly beginning to claim more of him. His energy waned, and there were days when the simple act of getting out of bed left him breathless. Yet through it all, he remained determined to stay engaged with his daughters, his family, and the work they were doing. One particularly tough afternoon, after a round of chemotherapy that left him feeling weaker than ever before, John found himself sitting in the old rocking chair in the living room. He watched as Simone entered the room, her face lined with concern. "Dad," she said softly, sitting beside him. "You've been pushing yourself so hard. Maybe it's time you took a step back. Let us take care of things." John smiled weakly. "I know you girls are more than capable, Simone, but stepping back isn't something I'm good at. Not when it comes to family." Simone's eyes filled with tears. She had always been the sensitive one, the one whose heart felt everything so deeply. "You've given us everything, Dad. You don't have to keep proving anything to anyone. Just rest." John took her hand, his fingers trembling slightly. "I'm not trying to prove anything, Simone. I just want to be here for as long as I can. I want to see everything you girls are building, the foundation, your lives, your futures. It's not about me stepping back. It's about me staying close to the things I love most." Simone nodded, her heart breaking a little as she realized how much her father had fought, not just for them, but for himself. To stay connected, to remain a part of the life they were building together. She leaned over and kissed his forehead. "We'll make sure you're with us every step of the way, Dad. I promise." As the months passed, the foundation launched its first scholarship program. It was a huge success, with dozens of foster kids across the country receiving financial support for college. The news spread quickly, and donations poured in, giving the Harris Foundation even more resources to help children in need. But while the family celebrated these milestones, they couldn't ignore the growing absence of John's presence in the day-to-day operations. His health had taken a significant downturn. The treatments, which had once given him strength, were now taking more from him than they gave. He spent more time resting and less time engaged in the hustle and bustle of the foundation's work. Still, every evening, without fail, his daughters gathered around him. Sometimes it was for dinner, other times just to sit and talk, to hold his hand, or to listen to him reminisce about the early days. The days when everything seemed impossible, but they had made it through together. One evening, as the family gathered for what felt like one of their final meals together, John mustered the strength to speak, his voice low but filled with the same love that had always defined him. "I've had a lot of time to think," he began, his words deliberate. "I never imagined all those years ago that taking in 6 little girls would lead to this. A family so strong, so full of love that nothing could tear us apart. You've all made me so proud, each in your own way. And the foundation? What you've built together, it's more than I ever dreamed possible." The room was silent, the gravity of the moment hanging heavy in the air. Each of the girls sat still, listening to their father's words, knowing this was more than just a reflection. It was a farewell, in a way. "I want you all to know," John continued, his eyes filling with tears, "that no matter where I am, I'll always be with you. In every decision you make, in every step forward, I'll be there. Because what we have, this love, this family, it doesn't end." Tears streamed down the girls' faces, but they didn't speak. There was nothing to say that could capture the weight of what they were feeling in that moment. John's voice grew softer, more strained. "You've given me the greatest gift a man could ever ask for. You've given me a life full of meaning, full of purpose. I don't know what the next chapter holds for me, but I know you'll carry on. You'll keep building, keep loving, keep making a difference. And that's all I could ever ask for." Simone, always the most emotional, leaned in first, wrapping her arms around her father. The others followed suit, until all 6 of John's daughters were wrapped in a tangle of love, embracing their father, holding on to the man who had given them everything. The room filled with quiet sobs, but there was peace in that moment too. A peace that came from knowing they had given their father the life he had always dreamed of. In the weeks that followed, John's health continued to decline, but his spirit never faltered. Surrounded by his family, he passed away quietly one morning, his daughters by his side, holding his hands as he slipped from this world to the next. The funeral was a celebration of his life, an outpouring of love and gratitude from the community, from the countless lives he had touched. People spoke of his kindness, his strength, his unwavering commitment to his family and to the children he had helped through the foundation. But above all, they spoke of his love. The love that had transcended race, blood, and circumstance. The love that had built a family stronger than anything else. In the days and months after John's passing, the Harris Foundation flourished. Amara, with the full support of her sisters, expanded the foundation's programs even further, creating a nationwide network of resources for foster children and adoptive families. They named the new initiatives after John, the John Harris Legacy Program, ensuring that his name and the love he had given would continue to touch lives for generations to come. And though he was gone, John's presence never left his daughters. In every moment of doubt, in every victory, they felt him there, guiding them, loving them, reminding them of the family they had built together. As they gathered together on the porch one final time, under the same twinkling stars that had always watched over them, Amara spoke the words that had been on all their hearts. "He was right," she said softly. "This love, it doesn't end." And as they sat there, side by side, the Harris sisters knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, no matter how far life would take them, the bond they shared would never be broken. Because love, true love, had always been their greatest strength, and it always would be. The months after John Harris's passing were filled with a strange mixture of grief, resilience, and a renewed sense of purpose for the Harris sisters. Each one of them had found their own way of coping with the loss of the man who had been the center of their world. Yet none of them felt truly alone. Their father's presence lingered in the air, in the way the house felt, in the little things they had once taken for granted. His laugh, his calm reassurance, his warm embrace. Amara threw herself into the work of the foundation with even more intensity. It was her way of processing the grief, of ensuring that her father's legacy would continue to grow and touch lives across the country. She traveled more frequently, visiting foster homes, attending conferences, and spearheading new initiatives. Every time she stood in front of a room full of people and spoke about her father, she felt his strength guiding her. She told the story of how one man's love had changed the lives of 6 young girls, and how that love had rippled out to change the lives of thousands more. Simone, on the other hand, found her solace in art. Her grief took the form of paintings, bold, vibrant pieces that captured the emotions she couldn't quite put into words. Her latest collection, titled Legacy of Love, featured intricate portraits of multiracial families, each one framed by the themes of identity, belonging, and resilience. One portrait in particular, a hauntingly beautiful depiction of a father holding the hands of his daughters, became a centerpiece at her gallery's latest exhibit. People flocked to see it, moved by the raw emotion captured in every brushstroke. Tiana, always the athlete, found that the best way for her to honor her father's memory was by mentoring the next generation. She poured her energy into coaching, helping young athletes navigate not only the sport, but the challenges that came with being a person of color in spaces that weren't always welcoming. Every time she encouraged a girl to keep pushing, to rise above the noise of self-doubt and prejudice, she thought of her father and the lessons he had taught her. She would often find herself saying, "My dad used to tell me," before launching into advice that had guided her through some of the toughest moments of her life. Zoe, the family's writer, channeled her emotions into stories. She continued working on her novels, but she also started a side project, a memoir about their family's journey. It was a tribute to John and everything he had done for them, a way of preserving their story for future generations. She titled it Family by Choice, a story of love and resilience. Writing about her father allowed her to process the depth of her loss, and though it was painful at times, she felt a sense of healing with each word she put on the page. Layla, ever the activist, used her grief as fuel for change. She became more vocal in her fight for social justice, using her position on the city council to push for initiatives that supported foster children and their adoptive families. She organized marches, lobbied for legislative changes, and even helped secure funding for community programs that provided resources for children transitioning out of the foster system. In every speech she gave, she spoke of her father's influence, of the example he had set for her. And Jasmine, the youngest, now a fully trained police officer, carried her father's legacy of service with her every day. She approached her work with the same compassion and sense of duty that John had instilled in her. She often found herself comforting victims, offering words of support to families in crisis, much like her father had done years ago. One day, while on duty, she came across a situation eerily similar to the one her father had faced all those years ago. Children abandoned, scared, and in need of help. Jasmine's heart ached, but she approached the situation with the calm and care that her father had taught her, ensuring that those children would be kept together, just as she and her sisters had been. As the Harris sisters continued their lives, they found themselves reconnecting with each other in new ways. Though they had always been close, their father's passing seemed to deepen their bond. They made a promise to meet at least once a month, no matter how busy their schedules became, to spend time together, share stories, and remember their father. On one such evening, they all gathered at the family home, the place that had been their haven for so many years. The house still felt like John, even though he was no longer physically there. His presence was in the walls, the furniture, the photographs that adorned every surface. The girls sat around the dinner table, the same table where they had shared so many meals together as a family, and began reminiscing. "You know," Zoe said, stirring her tea thoughtfully, "I always wondered if Dad knew just how much he changed our lives. I mean, we told him, but did he really know?" Amara smiled softly. "I think he did. He wasn't one to make a big deal out of things, but I think in those last few years, he saw how far we'd all come. He knew." Tiana nodded in agreement, her eyes misty with the memories. "He didn't need us to tell him every day, but in the way we lived our lives, he saw it. That was enough for him." Simone leaned back in her chair, looking up at the ceiling as if searching for the right words. "It's funny, I always thought losing him would break me, but it hasn't. It's like he's still here, pushing us forward." Jasmine, quiet for most of the evening, finally spoke up. "Because he is still here, in everything we do, every choice we make, every time we help someone else, we're carrying him with us." Layla raised her glass, a small smile playing on her lips. "To Dad, the man who taught us that love is the greatest strength of all." The others raised their glasses, a wave of emotion passing through them. "To Dad," they echoed. And as they clinked their glasses together, they felt the strength of their father's legacy surround them. They had lost him in the physical sense, but his love, his guidance, his wisdom was something that could never be taken from them. As the night wore on, they moved to the porch, the familiar creak of the swing filling the air as they took turns sitting in the chair their father had always occupied. It was a small ritual, but it gave them comfort, a way to feel close to him even in his absence. The stars twinkled above them, much like they had the night they sat with John for the last time. And just like that night, there was a sense of peace, of completion, as if the universe itself was reminding them that they had done everything they could to honor the man who had given them everything. As the hours passed, the sisters talked about the future, about the plans they had for the foundation, the dreams they were pursuing in their personal lives, and the ways they wanted to continue making a difference in the world. There was a sense of optimism in the air, a recognition that they were part of something much bigger than themselves. And through it all, one thing remained clear. Their father's love had laid the foundation for everything they had become. It had given them the strength to face life's challenges, the courage to chase their dreams, and the wisdom to know that family, real family, wasn't about blood or race. It was about the choices they made to love and support each other through thick and thin. The Harris sisters had learned that love didn't end with loss. It carried on, growing stronger with each act of kindness, each gesture of support, and each moment of connection they shared with one another. And so, as the night drew to a close, the Harris family, bound not by blood, but by love, sat together, knowing that their journey was far from over. It was just beginning. The foundation they had built, the lives they would continue to touch, and the love they would carry forward into the world, it was all a testament to John Harris, the man who had believed in the power of love to change everything. And in that belief, they found their purpose, their strength, and their future. They would continue his legacy, one step at a time, knowing that wherever life took them, they would always have each other, and the love that had brought them together in the first place. And that, as their father had taught them, was all they would ever need. As the years unfolded, The Harris sisters found themselves not only continuing their father's legacy, but also expanding it in ways they hadn't imagined. The John Harris Foundation for Foster Care and Adoption grew into a nationally recognized organization, one that provided scholarships, mentorship programs, and a network of resources for both foster children and adoptive families. Amara, still the natural leader, became the face of the foundation, but it was truly a family endeavor. Each sister brought her own strengths to the table, whether it was Simone's artistry and communication skills, Tiana's drive to inspire young athletes, Zoe's writing and outreach, Leila's activism, or Jasmine's commitment to public service. The foundation had become a beacon of hope for children and families across the country. And with that came media attention. News outlets frequently covered the foundation's initiatives, and many were moved by the story of the Harris family. How one man's decision to open his heart to 6 young girls had sparked a movement. One afternoon, about 3 years after John's passing, Amara received an invitation that took her by surprise. The foundation had been nominated for a prestigious national award recognizing organizations that were making a difference in the lives of children. It was a testament to all the hard work they had done, but for Amara, it felt like a deeply personal acknowledgement of her father's impact. She called her sisters immediately, her voice trembling with excitement. "We've been nominated. The John Harris Foundation is being recognized, and it's because of everything Dad started." The news was met with an outpouring of emotion from each sister, all of them feeling the weight of the moment. It was more than just an award. It was a celebration of everything their father had stood for, and of the love that had brought them all together. The award ceremony was held in Washington, D.C., a formal event that brought together philanthropists, nonprofit leaders, and public figures from across the country. The Harris sisters, dressed in their finest, attended together. They felt a mix of excitement and nervousness, but there was an underlying sense of pride that carried them through the night. As the event progressed, they listened to speeches and presentations, each one reminding them of the many people in the world who were doing good, who were fighting for justice and love. But when it was time to announce the winner of the Humanitarian Impact Award, the room fell into a hushed silence. The presenter stepped up to the microphone, a distinguished figure who had long been involved in charitable work. "The recipient of this year's Humanitarian Impact Award," she began, her voice strong and clear, "is an organization that has made an indelible mark on the lives of foster children and adoptive families across the nation. This organization was founded in honor of a man whose legacy of love has inspired countless others to open their hearts and homes. It is my honor to present this award to the John Harris Foundation for Foster Care and Adoption." The room erupted into applause as the Harris sisters made their way to the stage, tears welling up in their eyes. Amara, standing at the podium, took a deep breath, trying to steady her emotions before speaking. "This award is a symbol of all that we have achieved, but more than that, it represents the heart of our family's journey. A journey that began with one man's decision to open his heart and his home. Our father, John Harris, believed that love was the most powerful force in the world, and he showed us that family is not about shared blood, but about shared love and commitment. Because of him, we learned that the strongest families are the ones we choose to build." Harris, the man who taught us what love truly means. He believed that family isn't defined by blood, but by the love we choose to give one another. He gave us a home, a family, and the courage to be who we are. This foundation is his legacy, but it's also the legacy of every child and every family who has ever dared to love beyond the boundaries society sets. Amara paused for a moment, gathering her thoughts, as her sisters stood behind her, tears in their eyes but smiles on their faces. The weight of their father's absence was felt keenly in that moment, but so was the power of his presence, the power of the love he had instilled in them. "When our father decided to adopt 6 girls, people doubted him," Amara continued, her voice growing stronger. "They said it wouldn't work, that it was too hard, too complicated. But he didn't listen. He didn't care about the challenges. He only cared about love. And because of him, we were able to grow into the strong, compassionate women you see here today." His love didn't just change our lives, it changed the lives of everyone around us. And now, through this foundation, it continues to change lives. The audience was silent, hanging on her every word. This award, Amara said, her voice cracking slightly, is a recognition of the power of love. It's a recognition of every child who's ever felt unwanted, every family who's struggled to find their place, and every person who's dared to step up and make a difference. And though our Father isn't here with us tonight, I know He's watching over us, smiling, because this is what He wanted. He wanted to leave a legacy of love, and that's what we're going to continue to do. Amara stepped back from the podium, and the audience rose to their feet in a standing ovation. The applause thundered through the room, a powerful acknowledgement of all that the Harris family had achieved, but also of the man whose quiet love had started it all. As the sisters exited the stage, their hearts full, they couldn't help but think of how far they had come. From the frightened little girls who had huddled together in that barren living room so many years ago, to standing on a national stage, representing a foundation that had touched thousands of lives. This journey had been more than any of them could have imagined. Later that evening, as they gathered in their hotel room, the weight of the evening still hanging over them, they found themselves reflecting once more on their father's legacy. "Do you think he ever knew it would go this far?" Zoe asked, her voice quiet as she looked around the room. Tiana, always the realist, shook her head. "Dad didn't think that far ahead. He just did what he knew was right at the time. The rest, it just happened because he believed in love." Simone smiled softly. "He always said love was the only thing that could truly change the world. I didn't really understand that when I was younger, but now I get it." Amara, who had spent so much of her time leading the charge for the foundation, took a deep breath. "He might not have known how big this would get, but I think he always believed in us. He knew we'd keep going, keep pushing, because he taught us that. Everything we are is because of him." The sisters fell into a comfortable silence, each of them lost in their own thoughts about their father. It was moments like these that reminded them that, even though he was gone, he was never really far away. The next day, as they prepared to leave Washington, D.C., they received a call from a major news outlet wanting to feature the foundation and the Harris family's story. The national attention was growing, and with it, the opportunity to make an even bigger impact on the lives of children and families in need. Amara and the others agreed. It was time to share their story with the world, to continue spreading the message of hope, love, and resilience that had defined their lives. Over the next few months, the foundation expanded its reach even further. They launched new programs offering transitional housing for young adults aging out of the foster care system, providing mental health support, and continuing to offer scholarships. The John Harris Foundation became a model for how love, community, and dedication could transform the lives of those most in need. One day, while reviewing the latest reports from the Foundation's new initiatives, Amara received a call from a social worker she had worked with for years. The woman's voice was warm and full of emotion. "Amara," she began, "I just wanted to thank you and your sisters. One of the kids in our program, he's been struggling for so long, feeling unwanted, like he'll never find a family. But after hearing about your foundation and your father's story, something changed. He told me yesterday that he has hope again. He said, if someone like John Harris can love those girls, maybe someone can love me too." Tears filled Amara's eyes as she listened. "That's all my father ever wanted, to give kids like him hope." "Well," the social worker said gently, "he's doing it, even now." After hanging up the phone, Amara sat in silence for a while, letting the emotion wash over her. The work they were doing mattered. It was making a difference, just like their father had always believed it would. That evening, as the sisters gathered once more, this time at Zoe's house, they shared stories from the day, each of them marveling at how much the foundation had grown and how their father's influence continued to shape everything they did. "We've come so far," Layla said softly, looking around at her sisters. "But sometimes I just wish Dad could see it all." "He does," Jasmine replied, her voice steady and sure. "He sees it all. Every child we help, every family we support. That's him, living on through us." The room grew quiet again as they all nodded in agreement. Their father had given them everything they needed to succeed. And now they were passing that love forward, changing lives in ways they never could have imagined. As they sat together, the night stretching out before them, they felt a profound sense of peace. Their journey had been full of challenges, but it had also been full of love. A love that had sustained them, guided them, and given them the strength to keep going. John Harris had been gone for years now, but his presence was still felt in every corner of their lives. And as long as they continued to carry his love with them, they knew they could face whatever the future held. Because love, as their father had always believed, was the greatest legacy anyone could leave behind. And they, the Harris sisters, would make sure that legacy lived on forever. As Amara's speech came to a close, she looked out over the audience, her voice steady and filled with emotion. This award is just one chapter in a story that began with our father's love, but it's far from the end. Every day, through the work of the foundation, we are reminded of the countless lives that can be transformed when people choose love. We invite you to join us in this mission, to believe, as our father did, that every child deserves a family, and that love is stronger than any challenge we face. She paused, allowing the weight of her words to settle before continuing. Thank you for believing in us, and in this cause. And if you want to be part of this journey, if you want to hear more stories of hope, resilience, and love, just like the one our father started, please follow our channel. Subscribe, share, and let's continue building a world where love creates families, changes lives, and leaves a legacy we can all be proud of. As the audience erupted in applause, the Harris sisters stood together, knowing that their father's legacy was far from finished. It lived on, not just in the foundation, but in every heart that believed in the power of love. And with each new subscriber, they knew that the story of love, family, and resilience would continue to grow, touching lives everywhere.